Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today I want to do an in-depth review on Colossus's new uniform because I did one on Cable. You guys really enjoyed it, and unlike Cable, this one is a little bit less obvious as to why you should get it if you want it. And I know that a lot of you guys have been asking about it, and with the uniform sale having, just a few hours left until it's done, or I believe about 1 hour, I thought, now's the best time to cover this character. So the actual uniform for Colossus is pretty good for the character. As far as the character is concerned, it does up his survivability quite a bit in terms of giving him a lot more all defense and a lot more stats. And for defensive characters, having more stats is always more important, more HP, and just generally more tankiness. But what you might not know is that the stats on the uniform, also give him a lot of offensive abilities. The one that I want to highlight the most is the Reflect. And while Colossus may not be the best Reflect character in terms of overall numbers, in terms of how much he can reflect, how much damage he can reflect, the uniform helps a lot because Reflect damage is taken as a percentage of your attack. So the higher the character's attack, don't die here, buddy. The higher your character's attack, the more they're going to reflect, because it's a percentage of your maximum attack value if you read the Reflect skills carefully. So for characters like Destroyer, for characters like Luke Cage, for characters of course like Colossus, you actually do want to give them, counter to maybe what you might think, you want to give them physical or energy attack. Uru, buddy, you're stuck? Okay. You want to give them those Uru because it's going to buff not only their damage, of course, which, as you can see, it's not bad, stage 21 with the help of Ebony Maw and Beast, but also because it's going to help their Reflect. Now, unfortunately, because of the rest of my testing, I didn't really find another great place to show you Colossus's potential. And I mean that honestly. I don't think he's going to really excel for you in very many game modes. He might be decent in something like Alliance Conquest under certain situations against specific teams, but I think even in PvP he struggles to find his niche. And when we get to the actual stat breakdown for the character, I'll explain why that is. But I did find a couple pretty interesting interactions that don't necessarily involve Colossus, but make him a good support character. Now, none of these things really make it necessary to buy his uniform, because most of these things that I'm talking about, he gets whether he has his uniform or not. So I think my original statement about Colossus is still true. He's a character you should get if you're a diehard fan of the X-Men, the Russian X-Men. Otherwise, I think it's a pass. Until there's more evidence that we need uniforms like this, until we have more physical leadership or physical damage supervillains, Colossus really just doesn't have a lot of sway in the meta from a PvE or a PvP perspective, and that really, even at 750, makes the uniform not really worth the investment. We're actually going to be able to clear this stage 21. This is probably the fastest I've actually cleared it. I tested this once before. Because he has a newfound 2-second immunity on his third skill, and he has also a damage accumulation on that skill, he's able to pump out his damage a little bit more, and it does improve his survivability quite a bit. Couple that with his long iframe on his 5th skill, and you can really protect him for a long time, even in the face of, penetration, or not penetration, but pretty much any other type of skill. The sort of counterintuitive part to the to doing the rotation 3 into 5, I do think 3 into 5 is a good rotation, but the counterintuitive part to that is that when he's doing the 5th skill, because the enemy is iframing, he's not going to take any damage unless there's an iframe ignore skill. But you want to do 3 into 5 because 3 is the skill that gives him the immunity and the damage buff, and 5 is his best skill for damage by far. So you don't want to waste the small attack buff that he gets from his 3rd skill on anything other than his 5th skill. His 4th skill's damage is okay. I don't think I can tank these. I tanked almost the first wave of those purple lines. But you don't want to waste the buff from the 3rd skill on anything else, so that's why I do recommend 3 into 5. Beyond that, beyond 3 and 5, you can do 4. The nice thing about Colossus is that his skills all have a really... I don't know what just happened there. A lot of his skills have a really short cooldown, so you can really spam his abilities in face tank without having to run around, as long as you have near max cooldown. I don't actually... Sorry, guys. I don't actually want to finish this fight off because I want to clear a different stage. I want to get a speed book for Corvus, but I wanted to show you that it's possible, and I think with different teammates, obviously with more powerful strikers, I could do above 21, and this is probably his best use. I do have a defensive setup on him, but I do think it's ideal to keep him alive long enough, and I do think for his limited PvP capacity, defensive builds are ideal. But I think if you gave him a build maybe with Phil Coulson and Shuri, or maybe Shuri and a leadership, he would probably do better than he did with Ebony. Of course, if you added strikers like Scarlet Witch, he could do better, but that's more of a kind of artificial inflation. It's not really Colossus doing the damage then, it's Scarlet Witch or another character. As far as my build goes, I've got a rank 900 Colossus, which is quite good. I went full defensive, so we've got the 2 physical attack for the reflect, but then we got the 2 HP and the recovery rate. The recovery rate is to synergize with his obelisk or his CTP. As far as his skills go, prior to his uniform, you really only had to level up his 5th skill for the ignore dodge and the chance to penetrate, but now you need to level up as well his 3rd and 2nd skills. So his 3rd skill is the one that's going to give him that 3-second or 2 seconds of immunity, and it also gives a defense down to the enemy, which is nice, but it also gives the damage buff. The damage buff is up to 50% increased all attack, which is very nice. It also gives him an additional 25% attack and defense, so he's getting a total of a possible 75% damage. In addition, his 2nd skill now has penetration. It's got some defense down on the enemy, so there is some value to using that skill, but his main bread and butter is the immunity plus self buffs on the 3rd skill into the 5th skill that has, you know, 100% ignore dodge and 100% chance to penetrate everything except invincibility. And so the 3-5 combo is kind of the nice thing. The other bonuses that you're going to get from the character, of course, is the 50% decreased damage received from supervillain types. That makes him much better against supervillain types. The decreased effect of reflect is not really all that important because the reflect meta is non-existent. But that, with his other reflect abilities and his tankiness, does make him very, very good against physical villains. Physical villains are the ones that are going to basically be impossible for Colossus to lose against. So he's going to win every single time against physical villains. The problem is there are very few physical villains, and that's where I said his value for PvP is very niche. And until we get more physical villains, there really isn't a lot of value for someone like Colossus as a main character. If we go over to the supervillains page, you're going to see that there's very few physical-based supervillains. I'm going to include Apocalypse, even though he only has a couple of skills that deal physical damage, but just to kind of stretch this out. As far as meta characters that deal physical damage that are villains, you can see the list is extremely short. Probably the only characters we're missing from here are possibly Killmonger and Corvus, and yeah, that's basically it. Everyone else is energy damage or a heavy mixture of the two, with most of it falling on energy damage. So it's a very short list of physical villains. On top of that, we know that his uniform does provide him with the kind of immunity to fracture effect, and that's the new skill that STRYFE has, and we think, oh, Colossus is going to be a STRYFE counter. Well, no, unfortunately not. All of STRYFE's skills are energy damage, so Colossus basically has no chance against STRYFE 9 times out of 10. I did testing in PvP, but I will show it again to you guys now because I did find some interesting interactions. I first want to cover really quickly a fight against Apocalypse, so you guys can see the limited value of someone like Colossus against these types of physical villains. And for those of you that do have Colossus, I do, recommend that you keep an eye out for the future. We're going with this team here because this entire team gives Colossus not only a 30% damage reduction, but a 100% damage reduction against villains. Yeah, he gets 50% from his own tier 2 or his own 4-star passive. Then he gets 15% from Coulson and 35% from Shuri. So Apocalypse is going to do a laughable amount of damage. And because a lot of his damage is also physical, it allows Colossus to take basically 0 damage. I'm not even going to attack here, and you'll be able to see just how long Colossus can actually withstand the assaults. And you can see some of these attacks are in the double digits. We're talking less than 100 damage. I've got a CTP of refinement. That was the only part that I didn't show you guys. Apologies during the the breakdown of the character. The CTP of Refinement is basically going to allow me to recover most of my health when I take damage here, and that's where the synergy with the recovery rate Uru comes in. But as you can see, against the few opponents that Colossus has a huge advantage against, they suffer. The reason why he's just still not very good as a reflect character against heroes that deal physical damage is because of iframes. Iframes prevent him from reflecting damage when the character is in an iframe, so you're going to see here that he's probably going to die very quickly to Quicksilver if Quicksilver doesn't do his fourth skill. He's doing his fourth skill, and this is basically lights out for Colossus. So this is what will happen every single time Colossus fights a superhero, even if they deal physical damage, if they have lots of iframes. So of course, for physical heroes that don't have lots of iframes, for example, Wolverine, he can absolutely defeat Wolverine. But against those with, 2 or even 3 iframes, it's very difficult for Colossus to do well, even with a very, very good build. And I'll really quickly cover the Obelisk. It's a very good CTP of Refinement that I gave him. And Power of Angry Hulk is here, again, to buff his attack so that he can actually reflect more. You could go with a defensive set like Binary Power, but I think the overlapping heals are probably going to clash with one another, so I don't recommend it. As far as actually battling STRYFE, I want to quickly show you guys what it looks like because it's not pretty. So this is going to be Colossus versus STRYFE. This may not be the ideal team for Colossus, but again, 100% damage reduction from STRYFE. Now, he dies pretty quickly to STRYFE, which is possibly a surprise for some of you, but not to me because of all that energy damage. So the fracture immunity doesn't do much. But the really interesting thing that I wanted to show you guys is actually, well, what's happening right now against Coulson is pretty hilarious because he's taking very little damage, even less than Colossus was taken. So many characters with C names, guys. But I want you to pay close attention to what happens, and I'm trying to time my words here, when he fights Shuri. This is the part I think is really, really interesting. I'm actually going to stop autoplay so you can see what happens. I don't know if this is a bug. I don't know if this is only with Shuri. I don't know if this is possible with Shuri on the team without anyone else, because I didn't have time to test that, taking Colossus and taking Coulson off the team. But literally every single one of STRYFE's attacks deals 1 damage to Shuri, no matter what. And I thought this was hilarious, and I know the video is supposed to be about Colossus, but this is amazing! Shuri is basically a hard counter with this team to STRYFE, because now, even if I'm only getting 1 hit in every 30 seconds, if I manually play, I can kill STRYFE. He's not going to heal, unless he has a CTP of Refinement, so I can actually kill him, and I even have the type advantage as a speed type versus Blast. Now, of course, Shuri's probably going to die to Scarlet Witch or Deadpool, but I just thought this was insane, and I thought it was so cool that Shuri was able to... I should probably try to kill him now. That Shuri was able to basically take 0 damage from this new character. And of course, this is probably going to ignite the conversation of people saying, oh, STRYFE's terrible, why is anyone investing in him, yada yada yada. But I just think this is amazing. And just to find little interesting kind of interactions like this in the game is probably one of my favorite things to do, especially when they're happy accidents, which is exactly what this is. And I actually don't think I can damage STRYFE because I don't have any way to reduce this fear effect, and so Shuri doesn't actually... Oh, I got 1 hit in there, but he had his invincibility up. Yeah, I think without penetration or without Wasp, this is just a heavy stalemate. I don't want to stay here for the full 5 minutes, so I'm going to have to close my game. I'm going to have to reset my game, and I'll be back with you guys in just a second. So with all that information considered, I leave the decision with you guys whether you want to invest in Colossus or not. I do think that there is a place for him in the future of this game, considering that his passive applies to all allies and gives them all a whopping 50% reduction from supervillain types, so he definitely will always have a place as a support character. I just don't know how much his uniform is going to impact that, given that a lot of his other traits are not amplified to enough of a degree to make his uniform really that worthwhile. But for the hardcore Colossus fans, rock on. And for everybody else, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Subscribe if you enjoy the content and you want to support me. Hit the bell if you don't want to miss any of my videos. And of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care.